So let's start with tonight's lesson, which is how do you build security into your birth child as they go through the transition of moving into a step family. I realized when I was reviewing this that both of you, Fred and Karen and Melissa and Charles, all of you, your stepchildren are older, and the transition has already been made to some degree. But I'm going to go through the information because there are pieces of it that I think will be very important even now in connection to your birth children. So let's figure out why my screen isn't advancing. There it is. I'm going to review the goal of a healthy step family. The husband and wife are committed to learning and using respectful communication skills with each other, their children, and stepchildren. Their expectations are realistic. The marriage is strong and loving. Honor is given to the other living or deceased biological parents and extended family. The children feel safe, cared for, and respected by the adults and the step-siblings in their lives. And as I told you last week, when Jim, the first few years of our marriage, we could not claim a resounding yes to any of those points. We were in so much conflict, and it hurt both our marriage and our relationships with our children and stepchildren. The one thing I think we did fairly well was that we did give honor to the other living or deceased biological parents and extended family. Although I remember one time Jim's late wife's family, her mother and her sisters, came to visit, wanting to meet me and to see the grandchildren. And they all ended up in the living room telling funny stories about Jim's late wife. And I sat there listening, feeling very shut out. But I understood also that this was a connection they needed to maintain. They had, fun memories of Jim's wife that needed to be shared. But it was difficult to sit there and to feel so excluded. So the goal of this module is to build a secure child. Number one, to understand the guidelines for making living in a step family as easy as possible for your child. And that is one of the purposes of the house rules exercise. To address and correct any misunderstandings you've had that negatively affect your child. And from what Fred and Karen, you've said this evening, I think one of those misunderstandings has been corrected already because Fred is realizing he doesn't need to be the big tough disciplinarian moving into these teenage boys' lives. And Karen, you're agreeing with that and understanding that you're still the primary parent for them when they're under your roof. The unspoken expectations that often happen regarding our birth children when a step family is formed is sometimes, for instance, I'd been a single mom for 13 years when Jim and I married. And many times when you've been a single parent for a long time, there's the expectation that your new partner will help with parenting. I didn't have that expectation because my boys were teenagers like yours, Karen, and Jim and I decided before we got married that he would not be the disciplining father figure. So we avoided that source of conflict, but it's frequently a source of misunderstanding. The expectation that your partner will love your child like you do. That's pretty unrealistic since, Fred, in your case, and also Melissa, in yours, you came into these kids' lives when years of infancy, childhood, middle school, all of that had already happened before you became the step parent. So you missed literally millions of interactions, observations with these children that build a emotional connection with a child. So you can definitely learn to love a stepchild, or at least care for them very much, but you will probably never have the connection to that child that the birth parent has. You might have the expectation that with your new partner, you'll provide a better home life for your child. That may happen in one step family that I've been working with. The children have made it clear that they want to live with dad and their stepmother rather than living with their mom, because their mom's life is very chaotic and they just want out of it. Fortunately, the mom agrees. There's not a fight over it. But in that case, the children are gravitating toward the healthier home life instinctively. Co-parenting with an ex should be easy. That might be an expectation, even though you didn't get along well enough to stay married to that ex. To expect to have an easy time co-parenting might be a little unrealistic. Or in some cases, the birth parent wants to just dump the ex and exclude them from your child's life. I highly recommend that you not do that unless the other parent, your ex, is already known to be abusive to that child, or to be very disrespectful of the ground rules for sharing custody. Your child, children are not dumb, they're very smart. They figure out when their other parent is undependable or lacking discipline, whatever it is that you see as a negative in the ex, unless it's abusive, support your child's relationship with the other parent. Your child will love your choice of a partner. Rarely is that true, and often when the step family is functioning with effective strategies, eventually the child can grow to really love or care for your choice of a partner, but that's rarely true in the beginning. The new partner coming in represents another chaotic change for your child. Your child will make instant friends with step siblings. Again, rarely that might be true, but in my case, my kids thought the older teenage sister was kind of cool, but they did not like the younger sibling at all. And Jimmy was the 8-year-old son of Jim, and he was enthusiastic. He just wanted to step right into a new house, a new family, new brothers, a family with a dog, and it was he was well ready to embrace the whole picture very quickly. But my kids didn't appreciate that. Your child will understand that you're doing the best you can. Children will only see the situation from their own point of view. It's pretty unrealistic to expect your child to see these circumstances from your point of view, or to understand that you're doing the very best you know how to do, even though it's disturbing to your child. It's so important to be willing to look at the situation, the circumstances from your child's point of view, which might be difficult to hear. You want your child to be happy because you are happy. That is pretty unrealistic as well. You're happy because you found the new love of your life. You have a life partner again. You are excited to be creating a partnership that you intend to last for the rest of your life. But your child, again, is seeing this as an invasion of their world, likely to be seeing it as a source of great pain and insecurity rather than happiness. this is an expectation that I did, and I think I explained some of that last week, that your relationship with your child is already secure, so you can concentrate on your new marriage and the relationship with your stepchildren. I made that mistake, and Steve and Peter and I had been together since their birth. Steve was 15 when I married Jim, and Peter was 13. And I just assumed that we were cool, and that the people that needed most of my attention were the stepchildren and my new relationship with Jim. Years later, both of them in their own way began acting out, and I just saw it as a behavior problem. I didn't learn until years later, when they were able to express themselves better, that they felt abandoned by me, like they weren't important to me anymore, which just broke my heart. That wasn't my intention at all, but it is the result of this unrealistic expectation. I'm going to have you take a few minutes, and I want each of you to take a turn speaking as your birth child. Speak to your partner and assume the identity of the birth child you have the most difficult relationship with. So Fred, you will turn to Karen and tell Karen which child you're speaking as, and then say, when you left my mom, I felt blank, and fill in the blanks. You may not have heard your child actually say this sentence, but you can assume or presume, based on their behavior, based on how they have treated you. Speak to Karen and do these sentence stems, fill in the sentences. And Melissa, you might see if Charles is available to do this exercise with you. And speak as one of his daughters. Or if he's not available, then you pretend that you're Charles based on the 3 or 4 years that you've known his daughters, and do the sentence stems as though you are one of his daughters. I'm going to time this so that you each have 1 minute to speak as your child to your partner, and then trade roles. So go ahead, and please mute your microphones so that you aren't speaking over each other or interrupting each other. So which one of you would like to share what that exercise was like?
Well, I'm going to say that exercise was very different, because I picked my older daughter, and I realized that she's very upset, and I think, I don't know, it's hard to say, because they didn't get displaced. She was gone to college, and but she was very dumbfounded. She just didn't realize, she couldn't believe that happened. So it was, that's how I just know she's, the last part I think is the part that I think she just doesn't want to speak to me anymore. So
that must be very painful for you.
She's 24. I can't really, I mean, I something touched base that you had said, and I mean, I don't think I was ever a snot. I don't think I was ever abusive. I don't think I was ever any of those things. So I'm hoping that, because wasn't the effect, that'll in turn come around quicker than, once they figure out.
Well, later in this module, we'll be talking about some ways that you may be able to reconnect or attempt to reconnect with her. I want to address something you said about she wasn't displaced. what was displaced for her was her idea of the family that she belonged to.
Yes.
That was blown to smithereens, which was why she was so dumbfounded. And having our foundation, what we think of as our foundation, things that we expect never to change, to always be there, to have that blown up or pulled out from under us is very, very disillusioning. So I understand her hurt, and it's not beyond the realm of possibility that that relationship can be healed. We'll discuss some ways that it might be later today.
Sounds good.
Okay, Karen, do you have any thoughts about that exercise for you?
I think for me, because both of my boys were infants when I became a single parent, so really for them, it's all about all of a sudden having this new person in the family or in the home at such a late age for them. And they, one of them has expressed to me that he just thinks I don't want to spend time with them anymore, that I just want to spend time with Fred. And he said to me, well, isn't that true? Isn't that what you want? You want to spend time with him now? Not realizing that, again, they're teenagers. How much time do they want to spend with mom? But I can see how that affects them both. Again, me thinking it's important to that I've got a secure relationship with them, and I'm working on the new relationship, and at the time a new job, which is helping us have a better home and other things, and thinking that I didn't have to worry about this new piece with them, and it's proven to not be correct.
So you, in some ways, have made the same assumption I made with my two boys. And you're hearing the same complaint, that you don't want to spend time with us anymore, or we're not as important to you anymore. Fred is more important to you than we are.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, bless your heart. So that's painful to hear. The thing, in some ways, the thing that I said to Fred is also true of your boys, that their concept of what their family was has been drastically altered. And whether they can say it this way or not, they're having to move over and make room for Fred in the household, in your home, in your life, in their lives. And they would rather not, they would just rather things stay the same, because there was some kind of stability with that arrangement that has been upset.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Melissa, I'm wondering if you needed to take a break. She has a toddler.
I'm here. It's just
okay,
Charles is watching, the toddler, our son. So, but I really, I kind of wish I had gone through these empathy exercises, early on, because I think it really helps to, deepen that sense of empathy. I mean, I remember when we had first gotten together, I know, when I was looking at the prompts, I know it was tough for them they didn't really have to move households well, I guess that's an assumption on my own, because their mother lives literally like 10, 12 blocks away, and they're very good hands-on co-parenters. So I'm basically hard, I feel like I don't have to do anything. So they're so there, and I know they when we first moved in together, you know, I can tell that it was, you know, that they really missed being with their mom, even though their mom lived really close by, and they saw her, half the week. It was, and I know they wanted to, I think their parents to get back together, or
Of
there was
course.
that thought, you know. So,
That's the typical dream.
yeah.
And they may have missed having their father all to themselves since you were now in the house.
Yeah. And that was something that I was really conscious of too, you know, how to navigate that and
not expect to have Charles all to yourself when they were there. Okay, thanks. I know you've got your little boy asking for some attention. You might ask yourself what used to be true of your relationship with your child that has changed since the divorce or since you remarried. Fred, it might be appropriate for you to ask what was true of your relationship with your children when they were younger, before your marriage was in trouble, that changed, and particularly changed after the divorce. How do you repair or reclaim the relationship with your child? Emotional connection is made with a child when you enter his or her world. This is written for younger children. I'm going to address older children in just a moment. You enjoy them, you pay attention to them, you do things with them, or participate in the interests of that child, and absolutely no derogatory remarks about the other bio parent ever within their hearing. Now, in private, you can say what you want, but not within their hearing. After the next video, I'll address how this applies to rebuilding or repairing a relationship with an older child. This is a couple, James in particular. When he divorced the mother of his two children, he was very clear about wanting to stay very involved in his kid's life. In fact, when he married Kim, he made it clear to Kim that the kids came first. And I wanted you to hear their testimony. Okay, what can you glean from their story that may be applicable to your family today? Or what stood out to you about their story?
Was that a Karen and Fred question?
It was for Denny and also for Melissa and Charles, either one. So if Karen and Fred are ready to speak, go ahead.
We spent the entire time still trying to get audio, which we still got nothing more than a whisper.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's right. We tried everything on every device, and we thought we heard a little bit more, but we didn't get it. So we'll have to get it from you.
When I send you the documents tomorrow, you'll get a link to YouTube where this video will be posted, and you'll be able to hear it there.
Okay, great.
Melissa, I'm going to...
I heard about the family meeting, and that's something I kind of wish we had implemented early on. I think it would have been really helpful to our family. Not that we can't do it now, but I really like that idea.
I was so impressed with that as well. And yes, it's not too late to start doing it now. And even with your little boy, to begin the habit or the process, understanding the process of a family meeting. I think what impressed me the most about Kim and James and their implementation of the family meeting is that everyone got to say what they were feeling, what they were thinking, without being corrected or criticized, without there being any defensiveness. Just get it out, whatever the issue is, whatever the problem is, and we'll talk about it. You'll be heard. You know, in my 25 years of teaching communication skills, I've just about concluded that being heard and understood is the number one emotional need of human beings. You know, once we are fed and clothed and sheltered, those primary physical needs, the next need is for someone in our lives to hear us and understand who we are. So they're giving that gift to their children. What I missed in this video, and I didn't realize I'd cut it out, I'm going to have to redo a little of it, is James. I asked James why he was so clear about the need to make his kids remain very, very important and involved in his life after the divorce and when he married Kim. He told the story that his parents divorced when he was 12 years old, and it was a messy divorce. And both of his parents were involved in new relationships, and so neither of his parents showed up at athletic performances. They were not very involved in his life. He was old enough that he could kind of fix his own meals and get himself off to school. So he was left with the devastating feeling that he was not important to either of his parents during and after the divorce. When he divorced, that was the motivation that made him so clear that that was not going to happen to his children. He did not want them to feel the way he had felt when his mom and dad divorced. Okay, let's go back to screen share and see what there is left for this evening. I think that was what happened during their family meetings and other times when his kids needed to be heard or needed to talk out a problem they might be having with their mother or with their mother's choice of boyfriends, is that they listened, and they listened with understanding, with empathy. One of the exercises you're going to get tomorrow morning is a handout that goes through how to listen with the motivation to understand. So often when we're listening, we're not really listening. We're planning our rebuttal. We're thinking, you know, how can I defend myself? How can I explain my point of view, rather than listening with empathy to the other person's point of view. You put yourself in your child's shoes or your partner's at times. The same skill works with every relationship. And you do pay close attention, which is the first quality of love, I read recently, is to just pay attention. Do listen for what is not being said, but might be demonstrated by a facial expression or a tone of voice or by other behaviors, so that, we're communicating how we think and how we feel all the time. Your children and your stepchildren are as well. So they may be acting out what they're thinking rather than speaking it, but try to listen for what is not being said. Do repeat back in your own words what you hear your child saying. And you repeat back in a neutral, caring tone of voice, a tone of voice without a charge on it. You know what a charge is? It's like, you're really saying blah, 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 blah. You know, that's sarcasm and it's disbelief. So to repeat back in your own words in a neutral tone of voice, meaning, I really want to understand what you're thinking and feeling here. Don't offer advice and don't offer excuses. We might think that we're explaining why we did this or that, or why the divorce happened, or why the relationship has suffered, but children will hear that as excuses. And we don't offer advice when you're really listening. You just listen. Don't moralize. Moralizing is saying you shouldn't feel that way or you shouldn't think that. Do listen until the child is finished speaking. Listen to understand does not mean that you agree with what your child is saying or that you do what your child is asking you to do. Sometimes they'll be saying, I want to go to this party because, and adults will be present, I'll be home by 11 o'clock, whatever the list of arguments your child has for allowing them to go to a particular party, you listen with the desire to understand from their point of view, but you may or may not do what your child wants. When you listen to understand, it only means that you're giving your child the precious gift of being seen, heard, and valued. The challenge to listening with understanding, or the challenge to being a parent in a new marriage and creating a step family, is that having primary responsibility for your child. Karen, you mentioned a few minutes ago that was actually a relief, that you agreed that it was better that Fred not try to move in as the disciplinarian because your children are just too old to accept him in that role. Another challenge is co-parenting with an ex. Sometimes that is very cooperative and other times it is not. It's difficult. Consistently enforcing the house rules can be a challenge because the parent may want to make exceptions, but the only way the house rules will work for the entire family is that there not be exceptions. And then listening without advice or defensiveness is a real challenge for me. I'll tell you the story of Peter in a few minutes. Balancing the needs of your marriage with the needs of the children can be a huge challenge, particularly when there are younger children involved. But even now with teenagers, Karen, in your family, and Charles' teenagers in Melissa's family, balancing the needs of your marriage with the needs of the children is a constant juggling act. Allowing the relationship between your partner and your child to develop in a natural way. I said last week that the relationship between a step-parent and a step-child, the speed at which that happens needs to be in the hands of the child. The child determines how quickly that relationship can progress or develop or become caring or have a caring connection. And then sometimes the challenge is letting go, of knowing that you've done the best you can. I've worked with step couples where a child would leave the mom's home and decide they want to go live with dad. And the mom may think that's not a great idea. He doesn't have good boundaries. He's too lenient. He drinks in one case I'm remembering. And sometimes there's just the necessity of letting go of a child and trusting that the universe is out to care for them and doing everything you can to keep a caring relationship going with your child so that when the time comes, that child can return to you in a loving relationship. I'll go ahead and finish the PowerPoint and then I'm going to come back to my personal experience with Peter. Do not react to negative communications or engage in debates with your ex. That was a piece that James was very clear about. I have a video on my website right now about Jeremy and Lisa and the lessons he learned about working with his ex that took him a few years to figure out. It was basically if he got a nasty text, he didn't respond to it. If he got a nasty email, he didn't respond. If voicemail was left on his phone, he just didn't return the call. So he only reacted or responded to his ex when she called or spoke to him in a respectful way and when it was concerning the good of the children. You have to maintain your focus on what is best for your child. And what's best for your child is a hopefully easy cooperation between parents. Support your child's relationship with his other parent as much as possible. Do not allow your child to play you against each other. And the way you do that in a step family is the child might say, Dad said they come to mom and say, Dad said I could, or Mom won't let me do that, or Dad yelled at me or Mom doesn't make me do that. And you stop the manipulation by saying, your dad has different rules for you. When you are here, I expect you to live by my rules. Or Mom may not care about X, but I do. So when you're with me, please. And children can, one of the most important things I learned from a woman named Elizabeth Einstein that had worked extensively with step families before I came along, is that children can live with two different sets of rules in two different households as long as they're not made to choose which set of rules is best, and as long as they're not allowed to manipulate one parent against the other. The Make It Real is the homework for this week. I'll be sending the Big Bunny story, which is about listening to a child without judgment or defensiveness. And you'll also get instructions for listening to understand, and a copy of the recording of this module along with links to the videos that you can watch on YouTube. Or you can watch them on my website. All of the videos are there as well. Next week, we'll be talking about a loving and lasting marriage is the glue that holds the whole family together. It's very, I'm not one to get real excited about statistics, but when a child has lost the security of their nuclear family, their birth mother, birth dad, it is 10 times more important that the step family be stable, that they get to see the example of a loving and lasting marriage so that they know it's possible. I can't even count how many couples I've coached when I ask them, where in your life, in your family or your friends, do you see a marriage that you'd like to emulate? And I've never had a yes answer yet. They come to me for coaching because they don't know how to create a loving and lasting marriage, and they want to. We tend to, when children only know relationship failures, they're not prepared to create relationship success for themselves. They tend to duplicate the failure or repeat the pattern, which is just perpetuates the pain. The two photos on your right are step families that I've worked with. The photo on the left is just a stock photo, but I wish I had pictures of all the couples I've worked with. Do you have any questions or comments about what you've seen in the last few slides?
I don't have any questions, but I was just going to comment that I really like the listening to understand, because I think it's a really good reminder for myself and my family, because I know we like to get our opinion in, and just that's something that that couple in the video really modeled really well with their family. I think when you were talking about the family meeting, that's something that really stood out for me, was that it was just through that listening to understand that they created a really safe emotional space. And
Yes.
I just think that's so valuable.
It is critically valuable, not only for parents with children or a step parent with a stepchild, but also for a husband and wife. in any relationship. In fact, I had the privilege of speaking by phone to Harville Hendricks this last week, who wrote a book that I highly recommend called Getting the Love You Want. And they are promoting they are saturating the town of Dallas, Texas with their program called Safe Conversations. And that's what they teach, is that when you speak, you speak the truth, but you speak it with love, not with harshness. And when you listen, you're listening for the purpose of understanding the other person's point of view. And that creates safety for both persons. Next week, when we're doing the module on the marriage, we're going to talk quite a bit more about learning how to listen with understanding, and then putting that into a skilled discussion format where both persons have a chance to say what they'd like to say, and both persons have the opportunity to be heard with understanding. We've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to briefly tell you about my relationship with my son, Peter. He was deeply wounded when I married Jim, and I told you both my boys eventually told me how they felt abandoned and like they weren't important anymore. By the time Peter was 20, he was kind of nursing his hurt feelings and withdrew from me, avoided me. Even when our extended family got together, he'd make it a point of not being around me, not sitting with me, not speaking to me. It was very painful. And at that time, I didn't even know what the problem was. I didn't know what was wrong. And I urged him a couple times, can't we talk about this and work it out? And he would start to tell me how he felt. And rather than listening to understand, I would begin to offer explanations, like this is what was happening at that time, and this is why I couldn't do X, Y, or Z. And all it sounded like to him was that I was offering excuses for causing him a lot of pain. I finally got smart. It took a while, but I finally got smart and realized that the skill that Jim and I had learned that helped us save our marriage was the same skill I needed to use with Peter. So over the next, it was about 5 years, we kept in touch. We talked. Peter married a wonderful girl. They had 2 cute kids. So we had contact, but we avoided the conversation, the real issue. But once in a while, Peter would open up and start to share with me. And I had learned the hard way that my job on those precious occasions when he was willing to open up, be vulnerable with me, my job was just to listen with understanding. So I would listen. Periodically, I would kind of summarize what he was saying. I tried to do it in a very non-formulaic way because he knew I taught these skills, and he didn't want the teacher, he wanted the mom. But I would listen, and often, sometimes his memories were kind of skewed. He may not remember the situation, pieces of the situation that applied. I just let those go by. I didn't challenge his memory. I didn't challenge his feelings or his thoughts, and just listened, trying to really understand the depth of his pain. Quite often those conversations would end up with both of us in tears. And that, a deep conversation like that might happen once a year. But over the next few years, the walls began to come down between us, and the caring connection was rebuilt. Peter was deeply heard and understood by me. Just recently, he came down just before Christmas to spend a couple days with me, and we'd gone to the college where the kids are attending now. He found out their car needed an oil change, so he drove their car over to the oil change place. I drove my car. We were parking in the parking lot waiting for their car to be fixed. facing a block wall. And Pete began to share with me his philosophy of education and what he liked about what the kids were experiencing in their school. And I'm not sure what sparked me to bring up the conversation, because I don't talk about my work very much with him. But I started sharing with him my passion for helping step families. I said, I don't want other step parents or parents to make the mistake with their children that I made with you. I don't want other children to suffer the way you suffered. And so, my passion is to reach as many step couples as possible to help them create a healthy, happy step family much more quickly than we did, and to avoid the pain. I don't want other kids hurting the way you hurt. And the technician came over and knocked on Pete's window to tell him the kid's car was ready. I thought Peter would just open the door and kind of bolt away from the vulnerable conversation. But he stopped and he turned back to me and he had tears in his eyes and he gave me 2 thumbs up. And then he got out of the car to take care of his kid's car. I felt like I just earned the Oscar. And since that time, we've been able to speak more openly about my work. I think the reason he kind of resisted it in the past was, what can my mom possibly teach other people about relationships when she failed me so badly? But I think that element is gone from our relationship now. I'm so grateful. So is there any comment or question you'd like to make or ask as we wind up this particular session?
I just want to thank you for sharing that, Nancy. I thought it's just this really powerful story.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. And thank you for being present and juggling your presence here with taking care of your precious little boy. Karen and Fred, any comments or questions?
How much time had went by before you had the 2 thumbs up?
Peter is 50 years old now with 2 college-age children. I've walked on eggshells for a lot of years. There was about 10 years from age 20 to about 30 that he barely spoke to me. And his older brother at the time was seriously ill, and I was taking care of him and was very distracted by taking care of his older brother. And when his older brother died, then I thought, okay, now I'll focus my attention back on Peter. And that was when he tried to talk to me, and I just was offering him reasons why it happened the way it did. So it took a couple more years for me to realize that what Peter needed was to get all of the pain out, all of the garbage, all of the story from his point of view, and have me just listen with caring. Over a period of about 5 years, we connected every few weeks. We'd talk on the phone. By that time, he was very comfortable, loved talking to Jim. Sometimes they had longer conversations than I did. But, once in a while, the magic would happen and he would just begin to expose the pain to me. He'd start to talk about when this happened or when that happened. And by that time, I'd learned my lesson the hard way. I was willing to just completely give him my full attention and listen with understanding until he was through talking for the night. And sometimes that would be an hour. Sometimes it would be 20 minutes. And then we'd go for several more months with the, more careful conversations. And then he'd call some evening and start talking, and we'd go through it again. But so it was a period of years of listening for the purpose of just understanding his childhood from his point of view, not mine. He wasn't really interested in my point of view. He wasn't interested in what I was going through at the time, or that our marriage was failing, or that his older brother was becoming a drug addict. You know, children only see the world from their own point of view. And Peter was kind of stuck in that teenage place where he had experienced so much pain. And before he could move on from that, he needed to have his pain heard with empathy. I am guessing that there may have been 5 or 6 conversations like that over a period of a few years before things got more and more comfortable. And then, you know, this last time when we were at the oil change place, I have been sensitive about not sharing too much about the work I do or my goals for my work, because Peter has, in the past, not recently, but in the past, was understandably a little skeptical about what his mother could teach anybody about relationships. So that was a big breakthrough for me, to be willing to be that vulnerable, and then for him to be vulnerable enough to have tears in his eyes and give me 2 thumbs up was just amazing. So, Fred, when you're ready, to embark on seeing if the relationship with your children can be healed, I'd be glad to have a appointment with you, or a conversation about some ways that you might begin to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's not any more comments, I'll end this meeting, and I'll see you back here next Friday at 6 o'clock.
Sounds good.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thanks, Nancy.
You're so welcome. You have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.